Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back to the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today I've got some Week 5 fantasy football lineup advice with 10 running backs that I'm either going to be classifying as must-start or must-sit players for this week's games. Yesterday, I posted my wide receivers edition of this episode, so go check that out if you haven't done so already. But if you've got personalized or individual questions regarding your teams, for me, surrounding your lineups, or anything fantasy football related, drop that down in the comment section below, and myself or Eric will get back to you as soon as we've got time, and we'll get to as many of you as possible throughout the week before this Sunday and all of the games on the slate for this week's matchups. With that being said, we're not going to waste any time today, so click that subscribe button if you're new around here, give today's video a like, and turn the bell on. But let's hit that intro and get right into today's episode. All right, we're kicking today's video off with Darrell Henderson for the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Seattle Seahawks. This one is an easy must-start for me. Darrell Henderson is a strong RB2 play here in Week 5 against one of the bottom rushing units in the NFL. This Seattle defensive line has let up some big gashing holes to opposing running backs so far this season. And after the hot start Darrell Henderson had last week, I see no reason that he can't get off to another hot track just like he did in Week 4. The Rams did lose handily to the Cardinals last week, which slowed down the rushing production in this game rapidly throughout the course of 4 quarters. But in the first, Henderson was off to the races. He was playing high-tempo football, and he was getting out there and finding the available lanes that his offensive linemen were producing for him. He should come out here, do much of the same. The Rams are a very good football team. I'll take them to bounce back here, keep this game a lot closer, or even control throughout. I think that Seattle has struggled outside of the quarterback position in many phases of the game. So I'll take Darrell Henderson as a strong start here in Week 5. Myles Gaskin, the opposite side of the table here. I'm staying away. Keep yourself as far from Myles Gaskin in your starting lineups as possible this week. Against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this is a hellacious run defense. There is not going to be open lanes for Myles to be running in. Add in the fact that I don't like his usage, and this Dolphins offense is just not efficient right now. I don't like this situation whatsoever. I think that Myles is going to really struggle here. The run game is almost going to have to be emulated by a short passing attack and by getting the football out in space to wide receivers to get run after a catch. There's just not going to be much room. The blocking isn't really going to disrupt this Tampa Bay defensive front. You've got Ndamukong Suh, Vita Vea, some of the best interior defensive linemen in the game, on top of 2 of the fastest linebackers at covering space in Levante David and Devin White. No bueno. Stay away from this matchup. Myles Gaskin is a huge must-sit for me and will be shooting downwards on my rankings list even farther than he has seen so far this season. Damien Williams gets the green light for me against the Las Vegas Raiders, filling in for David Montgomery, who had a hyperextended knee and is expected to be out about a month or so here, maybe even a little bit longer than that. We'll see how soon he can return and recover from that injury. But Damien Williams against the Raiders, he is a little bit banged up himself, but assuming he gets the go-ahead to start, which I think he will, I'm starting him here this week. I think that the Raiders are very susceptible to the run. This is a team that has gotten beaten up, and especially against the Los Angeles Chargers on Monday Night Football, and even the Ravens earlier on this season, they've been gashed, and they've given up huge rushing lanes to opposing players. I think that Damien Williams and the Chicago Bears offense, as long as they can keep this game within a respectable margin of points, they'll run the football with ease and get things rolling just like the Bears did against the Lions in Week 4. And I think that this should be a fairly productive, solid RB2 outing for Montgomery's fill-in. Jumping into our next player now, James Robinson with the Jaguars taking on the Tennessee Titans. Forget all the noise surrounding Jacksonville this week. Forget Urban Meyer and all of his off-the-field activities. I think James Robinson has finally found a way to incorporate himself productively back into this offense. The Titans are one of the worst all-around defensive units in the league. It is an embarrassment to watch every week. James Robinson's a very talented player. He's steady Eddie. He goes forward, never really loses yards on carries, always finds a way to get positive rushing yards, and he's finding the end zone now, which is something that we lacked early on in the season, and he seemed to be able to take a hold of this the workhorse running back usage again that we saw from him in this offense back in 2020. So I'll take James Robinson here. I'm giving him the start. I think he's an upper echelon RB2 play this week and less of a flex or bench option as I had him trending prior to last week's impressive performance against the Cincinnati Bengals. Miles Sanders taking on the Carolina Panthers this week. Less is so even to do with matchup. The Cowboys ran all over the Panthers last week. They had a ton of offensive production, despite the fact that Carolina is one of the best rushing and passing defenses in the league. But I just don't trust this Eagles offense anymore. Miles Sanders has completely fallen flat on his face week after week, and they're just not running the football. I don't know what this offensive coaching staff is thinking when they are game planning on a week-to-week basis, but whatever it is an intelligent thought. You cannot afford to run the ball with your actual running backs 10 total times against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. What are you doing? 10 times. You have to win by ball controlling, keeping the football out of Patrick Mahomes' hands, and sustaining long offensive possessions and cashing in for some points, and pretty much it has to be 6 almost every time. Now, did they score 30 points? Yes, they did, but you still lost by 2 possessions because you gave Pat the ball too many times. This team is too Jalen Hurts dependent. They rely on him, and conversely, he's had great fantasy performances because he's getting garbage time yards, but they aren't a competitive football team with actual good NFL organizations because they aren't a balanced attack and they aren't playing smart football. Miles Sanders might be one of the best talented players in the National Football League, one of the most talented backs there is in terms of his explosiveness and dynamic playmaking ability, but man, they don't give him a chance to produce. Kenneth Gainwell, who's chunking in as a receiving threat, might just be matching or outproducing Miles in the fantasy realm because he's just getting these passing down yardage, these passing down situational usages that we're not seeing Miles get, and he's not getting rushing volume either. So I'm sitting him against Carolina. I think Carolina is a well-coached team. I think that they're going to bounce back. That's what good teams do. They come back the week after a loss, and especially a significant loss like to the Cowboys this past week. They'll come back. They'll be grouped together and organized, prepared for this football game. I don't think the Eagles have what it takes to produce the stats we're looking for out of Miles this week. I'm staying clear of him here in Week 5. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, he had a very productive game in the snow against Buffalo last season. As a rookie, it was one of his best games of the year, but I'm going to take him as another must-sit option for Week 5. He's been very, very good the last 2 weeks. Back-to-back 100-yard games. I mentioned that impressive performance against the Bills last year, but the things that concern me is how good this Bills defense looks to start the season out. 2 shutouts in the last 3 weeks. They're averaging 40 points per game, and the overall big picture intrigue for Clyde Edwards-Helaire entering this season was the expected use he was going to have as a pass catcher. Now, I haven't been a Clyde guy all throughout the pre-draft process, but the consensus for those who were was that his value was going to come in the receiving department. He has 5 targets total in his last 2 weeks. That's 2.5 targets per game. Mind you, for the entirety of this season, his target share is below Derrick Henry. That's ridiculous. Derrick Henry is seeing more passes thrown to him than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was, quote-unquote, one of the best and most dynamic pass-catching running backs in college football history, just based off of what he did in that championship season with LSU. Clearly, it's not been his role in the National Football League with the Chiefs, and he's being used a little bit differently. He is a very talented player, don't get me wrong. He can produce as a rusher and a receiver, but his overall workload scares me, and his usage scares me in this Chiefs offense. Again, going back, this Bills matchup on primetime Sunday Night Football, I think it's a tough one. I think that it's harder than it was last season when he had those good numbers. The weather conditions aren't going to be as big of a factor as they were in that game, and I think that the lack of goal line production is going to hinder him a little bit here, whereas the last couple of games now, he has found the end zone rushing from a little bit further out. I don't know that once we really get in there, if he's going to be seeing those upper echelon goal line touches that we want him to see. If I was the coach, which is clearly not the case, I would be giving Clyde the ball more than he's currently getting it. I'd be using him as a receiving back, but I want to see him used that way from his actual situation here and be thrown more passes. I want to see Andy Reid sprinkle him in and use him a bit more. But at face value, this matchup, the opponent, is something that I think worries me a little bit here. There's going to be a tough situation for fantasy owners to bench Clyde. I acknowledge that. I realize that. So this is more of a forewarning that there might be a little bit of a bust radar for Clyde this week because, again, especially with players of the draft capital investment of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it's going to be really hard to replace probably your third-round pick in your starting lineups. But beware, Clyde might have a tough week here. So just set the rest of your lineup accordingly, or if you have another really great option, like one of the other names I put on today's list, you might want to go that direction. Melvin Gordon taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers here. The Broncos, obviously Vic Fangio, just talking a little bit about last week's games, was not impressed with Baltimore going for the record and ultimately setting it at the end of that performance. He was very unhappy that they did not just take the knee. Whatever. If you haven't heard the press conference, go look that up. The Broncos, I think, are in for another tough road here. With Teddy Bridgewater in concussion protocol, it's not going to be smooth sailing. You're talking about a team that has had minimal turnovers in their first 4 weeks of play, has had uber-efficient offensive production, and while this is not a big play splash offense, they've been getting it done because they have not been making mistakes that have hurt themselves and shot themselves in the foot. Drew Lock is going to be your starter this week. Unless Teddy B can somehow clear concussion protocol, you're looking at the complete opposite side of the spectrum than you were with Teddy Bridgewater. Mind you, you're also looking at an offense that's down KJ Hamler and Jerry Jeudy, two big play threats who are now sidelined with injuries on the bench. So not only is Drew Lock coming in here and completely changing the play style of this offense, but he's also working with less than ideal options if he was going to be a gunslinger and chuck the ball downfield. Melvin's in a 50-50 split with Javonte Williams. And while this Pittsburgh defense has gotten gashed over the past couple of weeks here, A.J. Dillon, notably for the Packers, had a very strong outing. They were trailing by 3 scores late in that game to Aaron Rodgers and company. Their defense was on the field for a long time. Their offense kept having 3-and-outs and short drives. They were getting tired, worn out. The Packers brought in their battering ram and just stole their souls by playing smash-mouth football and bruising and beating up those defensive linemen. There are still great players on this Pittsburgh defense. TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, they've got Melvin Ingram out there. You talk about their linebackers. Devin White is very solid. Minkah Fitzpatrick. These players can still have an impact on a game, and in a situation where I think they're going to be playing an offense that is a lower caliber than the personnel they have defensively, this might be a low-scoring, ugly football game. I could really easily see this be a 20-17 football game, heck, even 17-14, maybe 17-10. It's a coin flip to me who wins this one because I think that both of these teams have excellent defenses, and the offenses I think are going to be sputtering in this matchup, whether it's Big Ben Roethlisberger being incredibly inefficient or Drew Lock turning that football over. But I'm staying away from Melvin Gordon because I think that overall his offensive inefficiencies are going to eat into his overall ability to be an efficient player. And I just think that, again, being in a 50-50 split with Javonte Williams, his touches are going to eat into Melvin Gordon's upside as well, and this is just going to turn into a spiral effect where you're not going to like the outcome for your lineup. So stay clear of him this week. Damien Harris, New England Patriots versus the Houston Texans. I'm starting Damien Harris this week. 2 back-to-back rough performances, Tampa's run stop just got after it and really swallowed up what was this Patriots rushing attack. And the week prior, Damien Harris had a strugglesome performance against the Saints. But what I think the case is for him to bounce back here is Bill Belichick is going to get to feast on Davis Mills, who had -5 fantasy points last week against the Buffalo Bills. -5 fantasy points. Just let that process for a second. Bill Belichick, who destroys rookie quarterbacks, gets probably the worst rookie quarterback starting right now in the middle of this tailspin coming off a terrible performance. It's not even that Houston has a poor rushing defense. It's that New England is just going to outcoach them. They are going to confuse the living heck out of Davis Mills, and they're probably, Buffalo picked him off 4 times. They might get him 5. I mean, that's what Bill Belichick does. I've talked about this in a lot of previous episodes. Look at what he did to Justin Herbert last year. Think about how talented Herbert is. What everyone says about him. They speak mountains of praise for him every time they bring him up on the television broadcast. It is ridiculous how good Bill Belichick is against rookie QBs. That's going to turn into a lot of freebie possessions. I think Damien's going to get some good goal line carries this week. You might be looking at a sell high player for week 6 fantasy football action. as this is going to be a player who I expect to have multiple opportunities on the goal line this week and to have increased volume because you've got injuries to James White, leaving more opportunities for him to be fed in just the overall production of this offense. And again, I think the Pats will ball control and keep this one steady throughout and ultimately have a very solid performance. And then finally, Cordarrelle Patterson. What the heck? This dude's the running back 2 right now. What? I mean, he's basically a wide receiver. Let's be honest here. He does all of his damage catching passes split out wide. He caught 1 passing touchdown reception out of the backfield. The other 2, he was lined up as a receiver. He's basically J.D. McKissick last year on steroids, but like 5 inches taller and 30 years old, and he's really a kick returner but also plays offense now. This situation is so weird to try and break down and digest as a fantasy analyst that it's really entertaining, but it's also very confusing. I can absolutely see why he's being productive. I can absolutely see where the raw talent is. I mean, the size that this dude has is incredible. One of his touchdowns was a fade ball that he literally just went up and snatched it from the DB. He was just way taller than him and more athletic. It's taken him this long to finally break out and progress as a viable fantasy option, but now you sort of understand why Minnesota drafted him in the first round like 8-9 years ago. Whatever. That's besides the point. Cordarrelle Patterson is such a unique and interesting player. He almost kind of reminds me of a Ty Montgomery, if you remember him from his Green Bay days back when he took over as a converted wide receiver and then became a running back for the Green Bay Packers. In the 2016 season, I remember I had him picked up off the waiver wire in basically all my fantasy leagues, and he turned into a league winner because he was putting up insane running back 1 production, and you could play him as a wide receiver or running back just like Cordarrelle Patterson can be played in your fantasy lineup. So it presented in a great, unique positional dynamic where you could almost choose where you wanted to pencil him into your lineup on a week-to-week basis. And with the touchdown production he's scoring, on top of the fact that his best value is coming as a pass catcher and as a receiver as opposed to a running back, the only reason he's still classified and able to be played in lineups as a running back is because he takes a good 5-6 handoffs per game. But what he's actually doing is splitting out wide, and that's where these numbers are coming from. He has completely just slammed Russell Gage back into the oblivion in terms of a player I was excited about being the number 2 offensive weapon on this football team. He is a non-factor, and it's because Cordarrelle Patterson's come out here and been the most impressive player. His, 5 receiving touchdowns he's got this season have got him just only behind Derrick Henry in terms of running back point production so far this season. It's been a wild road, but getting to the actual matchup here, we're playing the New York Jets, the Atlanta Falcons, that is. I shouldn't say we're, because I'm not a Atlanta Falcons fan. But the Falcons have the Jets. This is a team, whether Cordarrelle is catching passes or running the football, they don't have anything that scares me here. Atlanta is also a very bad football team, but if you line a guy with this much speed and size outside the numbers and ask him to run a fade ball, I'm not so sure anyone can stop him. And if you hand him the ball, I'm not sure that he's going to go down at first contact to anyone other than C.J. Mosley. That is really the only big force they have in that run game. I suppose Quinn Williams up at the first level of the defense at the nose tackle position. But, man, I see a lot of opportunity with Cordarrelle Patterson here. I'm going to start trusting him in my lineups as a flex play. I think he might even be a certified RB2 this week just because of that touchdown production, that receiving ability. In PPR leagues, this guy is giving a heck of a lot of room for offensive scoring. I like Cordarrelle Patterson moving forward this season. If he continues to produce, we might have a legitimate fantasy scorer on our hands. Alrighty, those are my 10 must-start and sit running backs for Week 5 fantasy football action. Remember, if you enjoyed today's video, to give it a like and click that subscribe button if you're new around here. We'd love to keep growing the SFS community, and we want to reach as many of you out there as possible and help you win your leagues this year. So again, if you've got questions, I want to be super interactive and a great tool and resource for you all. So click that subscribe button again one more time, and to keep plugging that. And drop your comments down in the comment section below. Myself or Eric, again, I said this at the top of the video, are going to do our best to get to as many of you as possible. There is a point in time where we are moving on to the next day's episode, and if this video has been out for a few days, it might be harder for us to get back to because we've now got new videos on top of this that we're trying to respond to. But the first 24 hours for sure, we're definitely out there plugging away at that comment section in the most current day's video. So make sure to leave those for me as well, and join that community Discord to get a more interactive experience with other viewers of the SFS channel. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.